My name is Heidi Sonboul, and this is my very first time participating in the $5 Christmas Goodwill Challenge. I have been following along this $5 Goodwill Challenge for some time now, and every time I always think, I'm going to participate, I'm going to do it the next time, but I didn't have my channel up and running yet. So what better way to start off participating in these than for Christmas? My so-called home is the host of this challenge, and I just think it's so neat to take something that has been given away and to give it a new life. Now, I must say that while I'm not a minimalist, I also don't like to crowd my home with a lot of things, because then it's just one more thing I have to clean up. So participating in this challenge meant that I had to come up with something that I felt like I needed, and I figured out something. So I'm going to take you on my journey to the Goodwill, and I'm going to link that in now so you can see that. I'm scoping out all of their linens and blankets because I want to try to sew something for our Christmas tree. And excuse my face for not having makeup on. It's one of those days. It's a Monday, starting it off. So anyway, let me look around and see what I find. I just left the Goodwill and I found exactly what I was looking for, and I spent under my budget, $4.50. Okay, I've got it home, and now I'm just going to give it a really good wash before I start doing my project with it. Texture on it, it's more of like a buttery yellow. I don't think it's coming up on the camera, but anyway, I'm going to dump this in here, wash it really well.
You'll need two things to create your pattern for your Christmas tree skirt: a measuring tape and your Christmas tree. For me, I climbed right underneath my tree and measured out 30 inches. I want my skirt to be large in size, so without the ruffle, it'll be 60 inches around. With a vintage ruffle around it, it'll be 70 inches. I like to try to save money where I can, especially because this is the $5 Goodwill Challenge. So I'm taking paper to make my own pattern. This is computer paper, and I lay them out 2x4, tape them in place. Notice how I got some tape onto the carpet. I do that on purpose because I like to hold things in place while I'm taping stuff down so it doesn't shift and move. And once I've got everything in place, I can lift it up and cut off those extra pieces of tape. Now I'm going to create my dots for my 30-inch line. This is the center of the pattern. Once you've got your dot at the top and the bottom, you're just going to connect those dots. You want this line to be as straight as possible because, again, this is the center of your pattern. I take my cutting plastic mat, I place the 3 on the line to create a 6-inch line at the bottom. Go to the other side, place it on the 8 to create a 16-inch line at the bottom on the other side of that pattern. I connect the top and the bottom lines together as straight as I can. Again, playing connect the dots. And once everything's all been marked, it should look like a cone shape, and you're ready to cut out your pattern. Once I have my pattern cut out, I move on to my fabric. This blanket seems to be about a king-size blanket. And notice how I'm avoiding the hemline. I want to use that later for my ruffle to lessen my work. So I place my cutting mat underneath where the pattern is pinned on, and I cut out my fabric. I cut it on the fold and cut off the end so that this gives me 2 pieces, and it can again lessen my work. When I piece everything together, I notice that I still can take it in some at the neck, so I decide to pin in at every piece 2 inches. If you had a Christmas tree stand for a live tree, you probably could keep that space in there to fit around that Christmas tree stand. Once I pin it in and tighten it up, you can see that the neck now is nice and fit. That will fit around my artificial tree. Time to get out my sewing machine. Getting everything set up and having everything by you is really important. Making sure you have the right color thread, it just helps you in this process of sewing. Alright, I'm ready to now sew my first piece into place. I remove that first pin and I do a back and forth stitch to make sure it's in place. Remember that this type of fabric can be very bulky and it can pull your project away from the needle, so make sure you keep your fabric up on the table, not hanging over the side, and you're ready to just get sewing. I follow those pin lines all the way down and sew all these pieces together. I notice how I didn't sew these last two. This is because this is the sides, the ends of the skirt that will wrap around the tree. If you sewed them together, you wouldn't be able to get it around your tree. I don't like my projects to be too bulky, so anytime I have extra fabric where I took it in some for the neck, I cut it off. Now I'm moving on to the ends where I use it to wrap around the tree. I'm going to do a 1-inch fold over and pin it in place. Moving back over to my sewing machine, I'm going to sew all the way down to sew my hem. Now I like my hem lines to look nice like a store, so I'm going back down it a second time. It almost looks like the bottom of jeans. This next part can be a little tricky, so what I do is I like to take my skirt and fold it in half so I can get the length. Remember that fabric earlier, the hemline that I wasn't going to touch? I'm going to use this fabric to help hem the neckline of my skirt. Here's that fabric where it's hemmed already. I'm going to cut a 2-inch band, the length that I need for the top of the neck of the skirt. Here it is hemmed, saving myself time. And I'm going to show, see how the fabric, both raw ends are up? I'm pushing everything down and pinning things into place along the neck of the skirt. I get all my fabric into place on the table so it doesn't pull away from the needle. And I'm ready to sew the neck onto this piece of extra fabric. Once I have it all sewn, I come and flip it up to the front side and pull this fabric over, pin it into place, stitch it down once. I take my time here because I like to make it look really nice and neat. And there you have it. It looks like you bought it at the store. So moving on to using the extra fabric where the hemline is for the blanket, this is going to be used for the ruffle. Again, why make more work for yourself? So I use my cutting plastic board and I measure out 5 inches. And I'm going to go around all this extra fabric. So I'm not going to show how I pin the ruffle because there's so many tutorials online for that. And I'm sure you can look one up and find it easy. I just wanted to show you how it's so simple to make a pattern for a tree skirt. And that it's very doable where you could save yourself a ton of money. I just trim off leftover. And once I get to the end, I'm also gonna cut off that last little piece that's hanging off on the ends because I'd like the ends to be raw, so there's not extra bulky fabric. I looked it up online. They typically run $100 and over. So the fact that I'm doing this skirt for $4.50 is a win-win. I'm going to turn the fabric and continue on cutting down this line. Once I have all of these pieces cut out, I'm going to sew them together so it's one long band so I can create the ruffle. I stitch on the ruffle and make sure I have nice clean lines. I'm doing a zigzag here at the end to make sure I pull it all together. And there's the ruffle. Look at how far it sticks out from the tree. Now I decided because it was getting lost with my carpet, I wanted to dye it with some dye that I had on hand. You don't have to dye it. You might get lucky and find a red fabric that somebody doesn't want anymore. But I decided to dye it, and here's how it looks. But either way, dyed or not, $4.50 for a tree skirt is amazing. And one more look.
Thanks so much for following this video and along this whole journey that I took today. And I'm super grateful for my so-called home for hosting this challenge because it was really fun to participate. And now I have this new skirt that I get to use on my Christmas tree. I have been wanting one for years, and I always would just wrap a blanket around my tree. And this is the first year because of this challenge that I thought, you know what, I'm gonna make one. And I didn't need to spend a ton of money on the ones that are at the store. Realistically, those Christmas tree skirts are so overpriced. And so if you don't have one and you want one of your own, go check out the fabrics at the Goodwill and see if you can find one that's reasonably priced that you can make yourself. Don't forget to click subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you liked what I made for my $5 Goodwill challenge. I can't wait to participate in the next one that my so-called home is hosting. I'm really grateful that she came up with this idea because it made me get to my crafty roots. All right, everyone, thanks so much for stopping by. Make sure to check out my other videos, and Merry Christmas.